All right, everyone. Welcome to a 21-minute live event. Joining me today is Melinda Smith, Salesforce MVP and Project Manager at Arkus as we continue our quest to Salesforce responsibly. And this time in 21 minutes, we're here to answer a couple of questions about Salesforce reports. 3 questions we're going to tackle today are, what are some of the best practices one should consider when looking to build reports in their Salesforce org? When should you resort to creating a custom report type? And what should you keep in mind when building one? And then how do you establish trust or consistency in reporting when implementing Salesforce in your organization? So Melinda, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, happy Friday.
Exactly right. Happy Friday. We've made it to another one and we're kickstarting it right with an awesome conversation on reports.
I love reports.
So Melinda, let's jump right to it. What are some of the best practices one should consider when looking to build some reports in their Salesforce org?
Well, of course, I love reports and dashboards. Well, probably one of my favorite things about Salesforce, and always has been in all their iterations. Those have always been really powerful. I would say a lot of the best practices, which seems so simple, is like your naming conventions. It's easy to just throw junk in there while you're trying to see if that report works or see if you have what you want. And then you're like, okay, I'll just figure that out later. So, kind of stick to a good naming practice and naming conventions, and try not to add too much garbage, I would say. Again, kind of on the example of creating reports just to see a thing or trying to test it out if like that's the report you want to create, and then not deleting them. Even from your own private folder, which is the default, you just start to get kind of a list of things that you don't use, and then you kind of become like blind to being able to find what you want. So utilizing your folders as well makes sense here. But I would say like the organization is kind of key in the beginning when you're building your reports. Like, where are they going to live? Who's going to see them? What are you going to call them? And get rid of the ones that you're not using, so it's just not this list that you have to keep going through.
Yeah, I can totally relate to it. I've seen several cases where it just, without you noticing, right, it kind of snowballs on you because you start getting in that day to day, and then suddenly next thing you know, you're creating these reports here and there. Next thing you know, you have 300 reports that you have to kind of like sift through, and they're all named some way, shape, or form, like opportunities within X time period by whatever type. So yeah, totally relate to it. Tell me some best practices then with regards to people that have been in that situation. So let's say, I guess, someone's jumping in and they're already at that point. I already have too many reports. What are some of the best practices you would say, hey, how should I clean this up? What are some ways? Do you have any experience on that?
I don't have a ton of having people clean them up in the last couple of years. But I mean, unless there's a fancy tool out there that I don't know about that can run an app that says which ones are being used and how often, I mean, it's just going to be like a sit down, maybe start with your recently viewed or your favorites, take a quick view at them. It's even worth opening a few tabs or renaming some stuff with like a keep or a delete and go through each one and just take a look. But yeah, if there's a cool tool out there that you could just run that says like the usage report of a report, now that I'm saying that, I'm thinking, I don't know if there's one out there that could just say who has like viewed it, and not like edited kind of thing. But I think that getting through, I recently viewed is the best way to start, I would think. Because if it's not in there, I haven't looked at it very recently, go ahead and get rid of it. But I would say the best practice is don't get all like crazy willy-nilly and start deleting. I would maybe even put like a to be deleted or some little 2-letter acronym maybe in the title while you're going through to make sure, and then maybe check with your team as well. Like, it may be a report, you're the solo admin, you don't use it ever, but what if it's out there for someone else? So it's worth having a team conversation or a team email that was like, here are the reports that I'm about to deprecate. Like, can everyone please take a look and make sure that you are not using these? I'm not seeing it in dashboards. I'm not seeing it, on records, but, please just take a look.
I think that's a really good point. I ran into a scenario once, and I'm not saying this was the ideal way to do it, but they were using the two-letter Z's, so that way
Oh,
they would just add ZZ at the end, so that way they could kind of like sort it by those reports that were
that
kind
makes
of
sense.
like on the to be deleted list, which definitely was helpful for them. And then actually thinking of that same customer at the time, one of the things that they were doing was that they created a private port folder that they called it kind of like the recycle bin, I think it was called.
Yeah, that's a good
And
idea.
essentially, they were moving those reports after a while into those folders. So,
Yeah, that's
you know,
smart too.
yeah. So that was kind of an interesting one. As you're saying, as you're kind of coming up with that idea, I was, kind of really thinking about it. So coming back to best practices, what are if someone's learning how to build a report, if today's like their first day, they just got, the boss just said, hey, we have this Salesforce thing we've never been able to figure out. For those guys that are listening that are just coming in and they have to put a report together, what are some of the key things that you would say that they should keep an eye out for?
If they're brand new, I usually guide people. I'm like, it's like a spreadsheet. Think of this as Excel. We're going to grab your fields, which are going to be your column headers. Each record is going to be aligned. So I think that if they're unfamiliar, I think that's a good way to kind of go about it, because there's rarely people that don't know or have never used Excel at all. And then being able to discuss like the sorting by, and having the conversation of, if you want a chart or a good chart, let's pick something to sort on. I think that the best practice of, when you get started is, I mean, it sounds silly, but you just map out, write on a piece of paper, what's the goal of this report? You don't want everything. Why am I running this? What's the point? Do I really need a report that just shows me all accounts? For why? Like, for who? Like, that's silly.
Right.
So, maybe make a bullet list, your 3 to 5 bullet points of what the goal of this report is, what you're trying to show, and maybe even whom. You might have a couple people that, these stakeholders really need to see, the opportunities against, these accounts, but this person really only wants to see opportunities or something. So I would make a list on what you're trying to accomplish before you run into what we talked about. Then you have 14 similar reports because you didn't really know what you wanted.
Yeah, I totally agree. The interesting thing that you said, I love the idea of getting a plan. I think that's something that at least in my line of work, I don't hear it often enough, and I don't know if it's the norm or not. But one thing that I really came to find is that it pays off a lot to invest time into putting the columns, because especially if you're going to put these reports on dashboards, a lot of
Mhm.
people seem to put reports together just to build a chart and not to tell a story. So the challenge is that they build this chart, they throw it on the dashboard, and then someone else who's genuinely interested in the numbers goes in there and then wants to drill down, but there's no good columns to give them the information that they need, because they just put
Yeah.
the very basics to be able to do that. So I can really empathize on that side there, that you're talking about putting some good content and kind of having a game plan of what really needs to be in the report.
And if Salesforce is listening, can I have more than 4 filters, please? That'd be great.
Salesforce. Let's we need YouTube to allow us to mention like Mark Benioff and the
Sure.
rest of the team.
I'm sure he'd love to take direction from me. Right? Nothing would make him happier, I'm sure.
um, uh, so so a couple more filters is what we need for life to be good here. Actually, since we're there, any best practices on filtering? Since you mentioned, the limit there, have you come across any good practices or any good ways to better manage filtering in general?
Yeah, what did I just do recently? And it's just escaping me. It gave me a way to kind of get around that. Was it with a sum field?
Did we
I think
filter out of the conversation?
I think so. I think we created a sum field I was working on with something, And it was giving me the ability to like see another summed point of data point. But my client ended up rolling back and really just picked the 4 that they wanted to sort against anyways for the sum. So it kind of worked out on its own. But like, yeah, I mean, filtering, it's that. And I guess I like filtered dashboards better though, too. Like if you talk about that situation, I like that ability to kind of be able to sort against even maybe a user or like an account. Those filters take a little bit to set up, but I think those are really nice to see because you can see a bunch of reports against, one filter. Yeah, I don't have like, that little practice playing with like the sum, creating a sum or a formula column. I think you can get around some of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So while we're attracting all of Salesforce high-end executives to listen in, I would totally say that if we could filter by the results of a custom summary formula, that would be amazing. That would be a whole new level of reporting. But actually, in filtering, that actually comes up with a really interesting thing recently, because you talked about a couple of important pieces there that I recently had an actual experience this week, which was with regards to dashboard filtering. And dashboard filtering is a really neat functionality for those that are listening and never used it. But the reports on that dashboard have to almost always be the same report type. Because otherwise, let's say you're filtering by opportunity owner. If you have reports on that dashboard, or you have components on the dashboard that are fed by reports that are like accounts or orders or leads or whatever the case may be, the opportunity owner field filter will only apply to the components that are opportunity reports, and that'll completely mess up. It'll try to pick something, and from experience, it'll mess up whatever was on the lead or the account component that would be there. So
that makes sense.
We recently, actually, one of the things that we did is that we went to the Lightning App Builder and we built an app on Lightning App Builder, which literally all we did was slap 2 dashboards side by side. And one was only activity information and the other one was only order information. So that way we could, for the sole intention that we got the dashboard filters to be unique and independent on each dashboard, and they'd be able to see both on the same window. That was a really interesting little nugget of leveraging.
Yeah, that's helpful to know.
Yeah, exactly.
I like
go ahead.
The last dashboard filter I built, I think it was like 3. So it was kind of fun to be able to, you can drill down even further. I mean, in an ideal world, I'd like to see it differently than like the 3 blocks against the top, but that's a good point though. The report type needing to be the same, because you're right. Like if you're trying to create a filter against a data point that doesn't exist in those components, it's just going to bomb out.
Right. So kind of switching gears, right? We got only 21 minutes to go. Let's talk a little bit about customer report types. When should we resort to creating a custom report type, and what's important to keep in mind when building one?
Yeah, I don't know if I have like a just hard and fast, like this is the way you should, when you shouldn't. I mean, typically, if you can't find what you need, you're going to need to build a custom report type. Custom objects, you're going to need to think through, how are you reporting on that? There's some standard functionality that Salesforce gives you, but thinking through what you want to see from your custom objects. And then anytime you're needing 3, I mean, there's just not a ton of standard, especially with your custom build. If you need to connect 3 objects, you're going to have to get in there and create that custom report type. And I know we talked about this before, but like one thing that's important to note that I think you don't really know until you do it wrong is the difference between, I have to look it up, the A and B, the with or without results. So being able to tell the custom report type, only show me records if they have a result, as opposed to go ahead and show me everything, even if this one doesn't have a record. It's a key piece on the custom report type and how they show, because then you can start thinking, why am I not seeing anything? I should be seeing some data here and I'm not seeing any, because you had said that relationship here only show it if it has records instead of with or without records. I think it's the A and B.
Yeah. No, that relationship is totally crucial. One of the biggest lessons, or actually kind of like a thing that we learned as we went along, and mostly by doing things wrong, was we learned that, there was a request once from a customer to say, I want to see all of the accounts that are prospect type that we never had an opportunity for. And custom report types are really crucial, and especially setting up the relationship where you want to be able to look up accounts, but they may or may not have the opportunities. You can use the custom report type to search specifically for, hey, accounts with no opportunities. It's been a little bit since I did that last time, so I know exactly how to do it in the classic report builder, which is a whole separate conversation on its own. But I'm sure you could do it in Lightning as well. There's very little that nowadays that only the classic report builder can still do.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. I think you just set it up there, and you, like you said, you tell it with or without, and then you can run it by. I think if you don't, like I'm thinking of a name field, for example. Maybe that's a bad example. Everyone has a name. It just has a dash if there's no information. So it already gives you like the null value without you having to like input that.
Right. All right. Listen, I know, especially we're talking, I know you're super short on time. I want to keep it to the big piece. I'll switch it to the last one here, right? Because this could be a little conversation on its own. For anyone listening, how do you establish trust or consistency in reporting when implementing Salesforce within your organization?
Yeah, it's a really great question, because especially if you're a consultant and you're doing implementations, everything really hinges on, or most things hinge on, getting the information back out. I just spent all this money. I'm spending all this money on this tech and these pieces and these apps. Now I need to see what I want to see, kind of thing. So if you have this great build, you have these great integrations, and you're not able to pull the data out as they want, they'll lose faith in all the money they spent. So
Right.
it kind of goes back to what I said about getting the requirements. What are your key performance indicators? What do you need to see? What do you want to see every morning? And like really drill that in. I mean, really take the time to even have that as a separate requirement session, because it's so true. And I've seen people kind of like, give like the side eye or the downturn face if the reporting isn't showing what they want. And even if it's just a user error, like, oh, you didn't say with or without records for this custom report type, it's so important that you don't try and have them have that feeling in the get-go, because it's going to kind of linger. So if we can have your own requirements and setting up trust, then you can at least set them in the beginning, and then having a great training session specifically around like that example, the with and without records, setting out the filtering. So as long as you can set up, let's say you're asking your client, let's give me 4 reports that are critical for you to see, or the board to see, or I don't know, the admin to see every day, and build those, and making sure that it's yielding what they want, and then turn around and train them correctly on it. I think it's really, really critical. If they can't find the data that they want and it doesn't yield, especially in a new implementation, it will erode a lot of the rapport, I think, that you've already built with a client, because now this is it. This is the nuts and bolts. Show me how much money I'm going to make this year. Show me how many donations I have pledged. If you can't show me that, then why do I have all this? So
Right.
it's really important to get the requirements really in the beginning.
Yeah, and I think that one of the biggest pieces that I've learned when it comes to report, that it's a lot of garbage in and garbage out. So I know it's a cliche thing to say, but what I mean by that is the fact that a lot of times, as a consultant, at least from the consultant perspective, we've been paid all of this money to put together these fancy reports and the fancy dashboards. But if the data that's being loaded in isn't good, then we have a problem. And a lot of customers tend to suffer from that syndrome of my data is perfect, or I think my data is a lot better than what it really is. So one of the things that we've started doing, at least with a lot of customers, is that we build these deficiency dashboards. So it was kind of interesting that it helped out a lot, because we usually do one dashboard, which is the KPIs and all the things that they want to see, the performance, and make sure. But we do one that's kind of like a deficiency side. There's even a great tool that we use that's called Field Trip. It's a free on the App Exchange. I think we can put even the link on the description below for anyone that's watching. But the idea is to see, are the fields that provide these reports being populated? Is there even
Yeah.
information? Or, if it's a picklist field, is there consistency in how it's being used? So that way it allows the team to kind of have an idea of saying, yeah, hey, we got to work on this, because otherwise, we're not going to get something out of it. It kind of at least raises a flag to say, hey, more attention needs to be paid on how you're managing your information.
I mean, data integrity could be a whole 3 or 4 conversations of their own.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think a field trip and deficiency data dashboard are brilliant, because you do get requirements that are like, I absolutely need these 4 name fields. I mean, do you? Okay. So, I mean, you ask the question if they're, adamant, okay. But, having, the field trip and the deficiency dashboard is brilliant to come back later and say, so we added these, and, maybe, they're not with me as a client anymore, but, you can teach the admin, come back quarterly and say, there's about 17 fields on this record that just really aren't being used. Let's get rid of them. So I love that idea. That's a great idea.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, we are at the 21-minute mark. I think we definitely could keep the conversation going for a while. I mean, there's a lot in terms of lessons learned with reports and everything, but I think we got a couple of really good nuggets. And Melinda, I really appreciate you making the time to share some of your insights and your knowledge. Love their conversation.
Anytime.
And, to everyone watching, and to you, Melinda, I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend. And as we usually close it off, a big shout out to the Fort Lauderdale admin community. And then as Uncle Ben used to say, with great power comes great responsibility. So remember to always Salesforce responsibly, so you can keep building amazing solutions out there. Thank you, everyone. Awesome. And thank you, Melinda. I'll see you guys in the next one.